Hi all, and welcome to a new look Cybeers. We've teamed up with the content engine to take Cybeers to a whole new level. Joined today by Jason Trapp, DFIR analyst. Welcome, Trappy.
Thank you.
Richard Granger, Global Head of Digital Forensics and Incident Response.
Thanks for having me.
And Millen, Digital Forensics and IR analyst.
Thanks for
welcome.
having me.
So, as always, first up, we've got our beers, and we're going to crack them open and give them a bit of a review. So, Trappy, what have you got today?
I got an Astral Drift. This is made in Surrey Hills, Sydney. It's a wheat beer, so I'm not too familiar
Never
with
had wheat beer before? First time.
First time for everything, but yeah, let's see how it goes.
Wonderful. What have you got, Rich?
I have got the Great Ocean Road Raspberry Gin today, continuing the tradition of not drinking beer on Cybeers.
It's only called Cybeers.
So yeah, very nice drop. Got it paired with a low sugar tonic because it's a bit sweet. It's a bit sweet, so you don't want to go too heavy on the tonic.
100 mil, 200 mil?
I just free poured it. So.
And Millen, you've already half cracked yours there, we say?
Yep. So I got one called Machine Mind. It's a AI-generated IPA from Caram Downs.
And I think you selected it because it's an AI-generated beverage.
Exactly. It's the trend right now, isn't it?
So, apparently. AI's everything. Forget about cyber, we're going into AI. And I've got the Rocky Ridge, California West Coast IPA from Bustleton. So I'm originally from Bunbury, half an hour away from Bunbury, a little town called Bustleton. Saw this and decided I had to give it a go. So give it a go, see how it goes. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Welcome to Cybeers.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Virtual cheers.
Fruity. What do you reckon, Trappy?
Yeah, it's not bad.
First wheat beer?
Pretty good for a first wheat beer.
Rich?
Yeah, it's good. Good gin.
Good gin?
Yep.
Yeah, good enough for
How's your
AI-generated.
AI beer, Millen?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
good. Right, so guys, today we're going to be talking about digital forensics and incident response. We're all in the DFIR team. Trappy, you've travelled down from the Goldie. I've just gotten in from London, where I was at the Zywave conference with Jack and hanging out with a bunch of insurance people and legal. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to get together and talk about all things digital forensics, incident response, and why these breaches are happening in Australia. We've seen, in the last 6 months, we've seen Australia's biggest breaches. So we've seen, obviously, it started with Optus, which we've covered. We did the episode on Optus. Medibank, Latitude, Tech One have just announced their breach. So, guys, why? Why is this keep on happening? Why does it seem like every other week Australian organisations are getting hit with a breach?
Well, for me, I believe that, well, from previous experience, when I was in uni and I was applying for graduate positions, I'd go up to a lot of these stands and be like, do you have any positions for security? No one had any positions, and it was just, we'll do software development, no security. So it seems like security is more of an afterthought, but that was back in, I think, 2018 that I went to those.
I think even with a lot of the incident response engagements we do, we rarely come across an organisation that has a dedicated security team member.
Yes.
They might have some IT people, but they don't have a security team member as well.
And I think even when they do, they're so stretched, and it comes back to your point around the resources. They might have one security person who then is doing advisories. They're doing the compliance side of things. Okay, well, then who's looking at the tech? Who's looking after pen testing and everything else? I don't think it's just down to the skills shortage. I think it's the lack of understanding of why this is so important for an organisation. How many times during digital forensics and IR engagements do we hear we've got no sensitive data that someone would want to go after? Why would they want to attack us?
Probably 90% of the time.
Yeah, it happens a lot. And I think there's a misconception now in the market that the threat actors don't necessarily want the data. They're not after the data to sell it. It doesn't actually make them any money.
Yeah. I was talking about this last week and sort of posed it as, if you're an organisation that holds data, it may not be valuable to someone else, but it's valuable to you, or you pay invoices. So that's pretty much every Australian organisation. You can potentially fall victim to an attack that's trying to elicit money from either a ransomware attack by holding your data hostage, ransom, or business email compromise where they're intercepting invoices, which is just happening all the time.
We've seen a massive rise in business
Yeah.
email compromise this year.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely probably the biggest thing now we're doing. I think BECs have increased now over ransomware because it's so quick. They can make the money very quickly. And the average cost of a BEC is $60,000. We saw one that was, what, 240,000?
Yep.
So it's very easy to do. Please don't go and do it. We don't advocate anyone doing BECs. But I also think it's because just of a lack of general understanding. And organizations don't understand that the threat actors aren't necessarily after their data to steal and sell. They want to get access to take the data, encrypt all of the systems so it's unrecoverable, delete the backups, so you've got no choice but to rebuild it and then buy your data back. Really, that's what we're seeing, isn't it?
Yep. Absolutely. And the backups is, something that's very important as well.
Backing up to a NAS isn't a good idea?
I mean, it's an option. It shouldn't be your only way to back up, though. I mean, having multiple copies of data is a good idea, and a NAS is fairly quick way of doing it on-prem. But also, a lot of organizations are using cloud backups as well. Like, we've responded to some where they were able to restore whole servers from cloud backups very quickly, which would allow them to get back online very fast. But also keeping that cloud backup information secure. I mean, we've had an incident where they did have backups in the cloud.
Which was great. We
Which
loved it.
Worked.
They thought they were going to be able to recover it very quickly.
But unfortunately, the credentials were found by the threat actor, and they logged into cloud backup service and ended
No
up deleting.
multi-factor authentication.
There was no MFA on that. They deleted all the backups. Couldn't recover from them.
Yeah, so the threat actors have worked out that there's things that they can do, and they go through, right? We're seeing more smash and grabs, aren't we?
Yep.
So it's not necessarily the dwell time that we're seeing how they used to spend a lot of time understanding the network. They're getting in and getting out very quickly.
Yeah, we have seen a few of the incidents where the dwell time was 10 hours max.
Yep.
Which is very quick for anything. And they basically destroyed everything, deleted all the VMs, tried to delete all the backups. They weren't successful in this instance. But it was basically a lot of recovery time for the organization. So it should be a big motivation for the organization to basically go with backups, as Rich said. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper as well, right? The storage. So it shouldn't be a question anymore.
No, absolutely. And we're seeing a number of instances where the NAS has been the single point of failure, the single backup. Trappy, was that a bad idea?
Well, because on the same network, they still have it on, sometimes they'll have it publicly facing. So, for instance, there's Deadbolt, which particularly targets exposed NASs to the internet. If it's on the network, then they're not going to have any issues getting to it from any other servers or any endpoint.
And that's the important part, right, is network segregation. I think that's why we're seeing more and more ransomware attacks happening. We're seeing that in the advisory team now as well, that there's internet-facing servers that the organisation has. They publish something, they've got an internet presence, and the organisation doesn't realise that having their sole source of backup, such as a NAS, on the same network segment as the internet-facing server, it's a bad idea. Because the threat actor will hit that internet-facing server because all it takes is one missing patch. And then once they're on that same network segment, as soon as you're in there, it's almost game over unless you've got EDR, SIEM, multi-factor authentication on RDP. Unless you've got that all across, you can just easily get to the NAS, log in, delete all the backups, and off you go. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing, though, and another misconception is, again, we don't have any sensitive data. We've moved our CRM to the cloud. And the question is always, well, what about the backup of the CRM that you took to then put onto the cloud system? Where is that backup sitting? We've seen a few of them, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think that raised a good point about data footprints as well. So organizations understanding what data do we hold, where is it residing, and things like that. We've had instances where we've identified threat actors have accessed certain folders on servers and things like that, and the client was like, there's nothing sensitive in there. But then when we look at it, like
There's never anything sensitive.
It's like a temp file for scans or something. So like there was passports and things like that in there. So it's sort of having an understanding about when you're saving data in your systems, where is it going, where is it sitting, how long are you holding on to it for?
Well, that was Optus' issue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They were just retaining data for no point. But it's not just Optus. There's so many of the incidents we respond to. They look and they go, oh, no, we've got nothing. We got rid of everything. And then they start to look through it and say, actually, that's worse than we think it was, which then that becomes a bad day. And then that comes to the question of, okay, when do we report? So, Melon, if an organisation's hit with ransomware, when should they be reporting? What should they be telling people?
Probably they should delay it as much as possible.
Okay.
Probably go with investigation first, find out what exactly happened, rather than basically jumping onto a decision and then notifying everyone else, and then basically change your notification after, let's say, a week, because the investigation found out that the data was actually breached, and the first notification said it wasn't. So I'd say probably wait for the investigation to finish, delay it as much as you can. But
you get 30 days to tell the privacy commissioner. Yeah. And there's been some backlash I've seen in some of the forums of people saying, oh, the company was breached. It happened 9 days ago and they're only telling us now. It makes more sense to have all of the information that you need at hand, right? To then be able to give the information that you need, be able to tell a story, being able to tell a narrative. So when the public is seeing these notifications saying, oh, this happened 9 days ago, what happens in that 9 days, Rich? What's going on? Like,
yeah, like I see it from both sides. Obviously, like if you're impacted by a data breach, you find out this company's been hit. I bank with them, or I use their service or whatever. So you want to know, how am I impacted by it? So that's the sort of the consumer point of view. But then obviously from the other side of it, in terms of response, is when we're brought in for a digital forensics incident response engagement, like we're trying to find out exactly what happened. So how do they get into the network? What do they do whilst they're in the network? What data did they access? And then did they take that data? So that's what we're trying to find out. And unfortunately, that process actually takes time.
It takes a long time.
It and especially if it's a very large organization with complex data, not only in sort of analyzing it from our end, but also, let's say they've got, let's just say 500 gigs of client information,
which is pretty small at the end of the day. That's a small ransomware.
A small one, and they might not have a clear understanding of what data is actually held within that 500 gigs. Then you need to do e-discovery across that as well, and that's a whole other process that's also going to take a lot of time, so that you can get down to that granular level to say, hey Nick, you're part of a data breach, name, date of birth, driver's license number, passport number. That's what was taken,
and that's what they want to know. That's what the general public wants to know, right? It's not just, hey, we've had a data breach and some of your data might have been impacted. You want to know. And we've obviously got the Australian team. We've just started up the UK-based team a few months ago. Jason's in the middle of applying at the moment to head up the North America team. So we'll have North America online by September. So we're going to have that capacity to have that full 24-hour follow the sun. But still, these things take time. It's still a lengthy investigation. Australia hands over to the UK, UK to the US. That still takes days of processing all of these images. As we said, right, it might be down to 10 hours for a threat actor group who are very organised. But these threat actors, they do this. I've seen so many notifications at the moment of Lockbit 3 on Twitter just hitting so many organisations. This is what they do. This is all they do. Is they compromise organisations and they take the data. There's the two new ones, Trappy, that you mentioned. The rebrand of Hive, I can't remember what the name was, Nakayama?
Yeah, there's Akira, Nokoyama. There's a few other ones, but there's 8base, which is a new one, which I've seen several postings for.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come out like so quickly.
Yeah, but Nakayama's the rebrand of Hive, I believe. So it's not just a new group, it's these people know what they're doing. This is their job, this is day in, day out. Yeah, it's just the FBI got their systems. Okay. We'll just go and take it back up, spin it up in another location and change the name. So, Rich, I'm an organisation in Australia.
Yeah.
Do I need cyber insurance?
I'd say yes.
4 years ago, I would have said no. I would have said no 4 years ago. And some people are going to comment on this and say, hey, you've told us before we shouldn't have cyber insurance. My view's changed, obviously, in the last 4 years as the market has matured. The presentation, I was at the Zywave conference up in London, they mentioned that only 8% of SMEs in Europe have cyber insurance. Only 10% of SMEs in Australia have cyber insurance. They saw a big wave of ransomware attacks in 2019 and 2020 that we haven't seen. I think it's coming for Australia. I think that the attacks that were seen in Europe is starting to transition down. And I think we're just going to see more and more. And that scares me when 90% of Australian SMEs do not have cyber insurance.
Yeah.
So, okay, I have cyber insurance. We know we need it. It's almost it's a non-negotiable. It's a business expense, right? It's something every SME should have. We as Triskel Labs have cyber insurance. We're a cyber company and we have cyber insurance. Right, so I have cyber insurance.
Yeah.
I get hit with a breach. What do I do?
Call your cyber insurer.
I think we say this every Cybeers, right? We've posted blog after blog. Call the cyber insurance company. We responded to an incident in, I believe it was October last year, and the insured didn't contact us for 4 or 5 days, or didn't contact their cyber insurance provider because they didn't know what they were going to get.
Yeah.
So, Rich, what do you get? You call your cyber insurance company, you pay your $5,000 a year or whatever it is for your, I'm not saying cyber insurance policy is $5,000, but you pay something that you don't think you're going to get a lot of value from.
Yeah.
What do you get?
So, importantly, you'll get essentially like a breach coach. So that's someone that might be part of the insurer, or it might be part of the law firm that works with an insurer. And essentially what they're going to do is guide you through the incident. So they're going to help you along the way and figure out what needs to be done. A lot of the time that will involve appointing a DFIR company to come in and actually do the investigation. So they'll have a panel of approved vendors that they can use for that. And essentially they're going to do all the technical work, find out what happened, how it happened.
Or try to.
And then provide you some recommendations so hopefully it never happens to you again. But they're also going to look at things from a privacy perspective. So if it is ransomware and there's been data exfiltration, they'll be able to go, all right, well, this is an eligible data breach. This is going to need some input from a law firm. And then they'll be able to also appoint lawyers who will be able to assist with that side of it as well.
So for your policy, you get everything, by the sounds of it, which a lot of organisations don't understand, right? They think that we just buy this insurance and maybe we'll get some protection. No, you get everything. The incident's handled from end to end. As I say, the DFIR side, the legal, the comms, the crisis communication that they get involved with. If you're facing needing to pay a ransom, ransomware negotiators get involved, which is a whole separate topic I think that we'll discuss on another day, is ransomware negotiators, because that's an interesting one. But what if I decide that I want to pay the ransom? What happens then? Can I pay the ransom?
There's a lot of questions asked with that because there's a lot of time load. So you've got to look at, is the entity sanctioned? Is there any legal ramifications for if you do pay the ransom? How are you going to get the money on the blockchain quickly? Because to get that large amount of money onto the blockchain is an incredibly difficult job, and only few firms can actually do that. So you do have to think about quite hard about whether or not you want to go down that path.
Yeah, and then once you've paid the ransom, it takes some time to get the decryption keys and get it paid, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like probably the shortest time that I have seen is 3 days.
Yep.
Which is very short. Usually it takes probably a week to get the data back once you pay it. And
to even get the decryption keys.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And most of the payments have to go up to the US, which is then a SWIFT payment, which takes a few business days to clear.
Yep.
So it's not a simple process that you just pay the money and you get the decryption keys back.
Yeah. And then you have to think about the moral side as well. Do you want to pay the basically the criminals, right?
Well, they're not basically criminals; they are criminals. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So there is a moral side as well. Like, do you want to pay? So probably I'd say, unless you absolutely have to, don't go on that route. Don't even think about it. Basically, just try to secure everything, get your backups properly, and then if everything is not working properly, then think about basically paying the ransom.
Is the better side not to invest in cybersecurity at the forefront?
I don't think so.
No, don't invest in cyber at the forefront beforehand. Controversial. I mean, isn't it better to invest and make sure you've got a SIEM and make sure you have EDR, make sure you've got good backups before an incident is even able to hit you, so you don't even have to think about the ransom being
No,
paid?
so I said that because I think you first should invest on MSPs, on getting a good IT team.
Yeah,
And
that's key, isn't it?
Because that's the biggest thing that we have seen in the incidents that we have responded so far, which is like they don't even have a good IT team which can handle their own infrastructure, right? Then once you get that team, then you think about cybersecurity. And do think about cybersecurity. I'm not saying don't invest in cyber. I want a job. But still, like...
But no, you're right. The MSP side of things is important. And really it's reviewing, not just having the MSP, but reviewing the contract that you've got with them. And if the contract says, we will patch your firewall, we will patch all your systems, we will patch your routers, we'll patch your switches, have some form of independent check. Have a vulnerability management solution that gives you that validation. So have that in place, but then provide the assurance to say, yes, they are doing this. So it's making sure and keeping the MSP to task and actually making sure they're doing it. Rich, shouldn't MSP be handling the security side of things?
Unless they've got dedicated trained professionals in that specific field, like, talk about vulnerability management, SOC, DFIR, probably not. Because, not to sort of rag on MSPs, but we have had a couple of engagements where, like, they've done an investigation and provided the client with a report, which has turned out to be incorrect. And that's not to sort of say anything about them, but it's just the fact that they didn't know what to look for. They weren't, an
They're
expert.
not doing this this day in, day out.
So, and that sort of led to things being missed in that report, and that sort of came to light later on, which it didn't turn out very well for the client. But yeah, I think if there's not a trained, certified professional doing it, then it should be sort of, if an incident comes up, they go, all right, we've had a brief look, this is bad. And we have had cases where the MSP's gone, yeah, there probably shouldn't be that account clearing event logs on this server at 2 o'clock in the morning. They have a look and they're like, yeah, this is bad. Call the client, get someone in. And it's just about sort of knowing your limitations and engaging the right people to investigate it.
It's even from the monitoring perspective, right? It's not just the DFIR side. So there's that conflict of interest, isn't there? That an MSP is offering patch management. They're the ones monitoring the network. Are they necessarily going to say, yes, there's a critical vulnerability that we haven't patched? More than likely not. And then you should have that segregation. So the MSP is not marking their own homework.
Yeah.
So they're not looking at both the network and the security side of things. And I think we're seeing more and more of that MSPs are starting to offer security services because cyber's this hot thing, isn't it? It's it's not just something that we've chosen to do. This has been my whole career. I've done nothing else, and unfortunately, we are seeing the rise of these MSPs who see this as a revenue thing, where they're looking, going, okay, well, there's money to be made here. We're going to start offering security services. That's why our tagline is "When experience matters." This is all we've done. It's all we'll ever do. And I think that's the really important thing. We're just seeing too many where the MSP just hasn't done what they're saying. We're seeing a few at the moment where it's an MSP might not be right sized for the client.
Yeah. We've had a couple of engagements where sort of post incident, the client's like, we've sort of outgrown. There might have been a family friend or a smaller MSP, and they've obviously grown a lot as a company since, they brought that MSP on, and they're sort of they part ways at the end of an incident.
Or in the middle.
Or in the middle. That's
never
happened
fun.
as well.
Just getting credentials for firewalls in the middle of an incident just adds a little bit of complexity.
Yeah.
So Trappy, talk to me about the new term that we're starting to see, triple extortion. We know double extortion. So double is obviously for those playing at home, where they come in, encrypt systems, delete backups, steal the data, send a ransom note. So ransom note sits there on a machine, typically be on a server. It's bad enough day as it is. Triple extortion. What is it?
Yeah, so with triple extortion, you can face a multitude of things. So they do the typical double extortion, and then they add an extra layer. So they can add things such as DDoS attacks, or they can add, they can call up clients. So, for instance, they can call up family members or different clients and say, hey, we've encrypted this company, tell them to pay us. And
That's scary, isn't it?
yeah.
Big, thick Russian accent coming down. It's not always Russian. Should caveat. There is others as well. Most of them are Russian threat actors. A phone call coming down. They've gotten into details from Zoom info. We all know Zoom info. And then they find the family members and they start to call them, trying to force them to pay.
Yeah, and they do spoof they do spoof the numbers that are used. So, for instance, they can spoof the CFO's number and make it to call the CEO and pretend that it's their number getting called from.
Yeah. I think the one that scared me the most was a recent one that we did where they sent the ransom note to all the printers in the organization. So every printer just printed the ransom note. That if you're on the end of that and your end users are getting a ransom note printed, that just puts you into a whole different mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we've seen them as well, deliver the ransom note through emailing all staff, which is not great.
No.
For the staff members to receive that. But
yeah, imagine if you're getting an all-staff email and a ransom note printed, and reception being called, this person calling down saying, that just forces you into a different mindset. Ransoms are the worst day of most organizations' lives, and then you've got that on top. It just adds a whole nother level of complexity.
Yeah.
Yep. And it all comes down to, as you said earlier, do you want cyber insurance or not? Because if something like this happens, you want all help you can get from wherever you can get, right? And if you have cyber insurance, they can provide all the help you need in scenarios like this. So I think the value of cyber insurance is increasing rapidly, and I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. And we're still we're still very far behind the eight ball compared to what we're seeing in Europe for cyber insurance. We're going to start seeing more and more of the European effect where they'll write custom policies now out of London. So it's not just answer these 10 questions. Have you done pen testing? Do you do vulnerability assessments? Do you have a SIEM, EDR? In Europe, they'll run an external vulnerability scan against your organization and they'll write a custom policy based on your level of risk. They'll do an internal vulnerability scan. Here's your level of risk. Sorry, you're at an unacceptable level of risk. We cannot insure you. The 10 questions are gone from London. They don't do that anymore. They'll come in and they'll ask a series of questions and they'll get to know your organization to see if you're insurable. So it's not just having the insurance and being able to buy it like car insurance. They're now assessing based on the level of risk that you've got, which moves it into a whole new realm.
You mentioned the car insurance, so I won't quote it word for word, but this is from a client, and this is sort of her talking about her experience of a cyber incident and finding out very quickly that cyber insurance not like your home and contents insurance. Like if you get home and contents, you have a leak in your roof, you call them, they'll send someone out and say, you got a leak. 2 weeks later, they'll send someone out to come fix it. But for her experience was she called the cyber insurance company, and within a couple of hours, she had everyone she needed assembled to basically walk her through everything that needed to be done for the next 7 weeks.
Yeah, and hand in hand through the whole process. I think we responded to one a few weeks ago that was within 12 minutes. 12 minutes of the phone call. So it came in late afternoon on a Friday, like it always does, the Friday afternoon specials. Love those. And we responded within 12 minutes of being on the call because we know that it is so important for that organisation to have that support and have the feeling of there's people here to help. So, as we say, cyber insurance needs to be the first call. Don't just wait. Don't pay for the response and go 2 months later to your cyber insurer and make a claim. Get onto them straight away. They've got the preferred people they work with. It comes back to a car accident. They've got their preferred repairers. You need to be doing the same thing from a cyber perspective.
Yeah, and you don't want to do things that aren't, like, if you send all the quotes to your cyber insurer, you're not going to know if they're coverable or not.
No.
So you could just be sending through, or you could be getting work done that's not covered, and you're just wasting a lot of money.
Well, that's another interesting topic you raise. Ransom payments, are they coverable?
Depends on your coverage, I guess. But there's a lot to discuss there.
Depends.
That's the typical cyber answer. It depends.
Yeah, I think you'll find that, specific circumstances, if there's no situation where they can continue operate their business unless they pay the ransom and get a decryptor. But then, I mean, it would also depend on what's in the policy.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be in that position and not have it covered in their policy.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm getting to is reviewing your policy, right? So we've said cyber insurance is worthwhile, but review your policy. Make sure that what you're expected to cover is covered, but also make sure your coverage limits are appropriate for your business. Yeah. There was one we've done recently where for their business and what they do and their size, their limit might not have quite been enough. And that makes it really tricky for the insured to look and go, well, how am I going to get back online?
Yep.
So it's making sure that you're reviewing the policy, not just renewing. Again, the Zywave conference, they said that most of the policies that they see are just renewals. Make sure you're going out and reviewing the market, seeing what's out there. Unfortunately, a lot of brokers in Australia don't understand cyber insurance. Out of London, they're starting to understand. And for everyone who doesn't realise, most of the cyber insurance in Australia comes out of London. That's why they host Zywave up there. Although Clyde & Co guys just did an absolutely phenomenal job organising their incident response summit up in Sydney a couple of weeks ago that we sponsored. So we're starting to see more of this happening, and Australians starting to realise, because of the breaches that are happening, that they do need cyber insurance. They do need to work with DFIR companies and have these discussions.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make the cyber summit with Clyde & Co, but talking to Jack and Craig afterwards, there was a lot of discussions there about, you can also do sort of walkthroughs about a response to try and figure out what your coverage limit should be. So going through a scenario with, let's say ransomware, how is it going to work for our organisation? What are the costs going to be? And then you can sort of factor that into your coverage limits.
Yeah. So chatting to your broker about that and asking these questions, or getting in touch with the likes of Clyde's and some of the other legal firms that we work with to ask these questions and to go through these scenarios.
Yeah.
So guys, I'm conscious my beer's almost finished, and I always look at this and can't believe how long we actually chat for. Key takeaways for today, if you've got one each, I'll start with you, Milan. What's the key messaging from you for today?
Probably just get cyber insurance, and don't only rely on cyber insurance. Get your security sorted as well. So, you'll get your help when something happens, when you do need help from cyber insurance. But that doesn't mean that there won't be any disruptions. There won't be any stress. So it's better to get your security right, and then have cyber insurance as a backup policy. Yeah. But don't just rely on cyber insurance.
100%. It's there as a fail-safe, as a bit of a safety net, not the thing that you should be relying on. Mine is, and considering the topic is why these breaches happening still in 2023, or why we're seeing more, get an EDR. I can't call out a specific brand, but we know there's a couple that we see continuously. There's probably 4 or 5 just legacy antivirus systems that they just don't cut it in 2023. Get an EDR solution. So CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender, There's a whole raft of them out there. Get an EDR, make sure it's monitored 24/7, 365, and test it. Do red teaming. Have an EDR, do red teaming. Those two things, you're probably going to reduce your likelihood of a ransomware. That's probably my two takeaways.
Deploy it everywhere.
Deploy everywhere. run a scan using a tool such as RunZero, or used to be called Rumble, written by HD Moore. Absolutely phenomenal tool. Very cost effective. It will tell you the assets that are out there in your network, and then you can do a comparison between what's pulled out in RunZero. What have I got in my EDR solution? What do I have in my SIEM solution? I'm missing my agents on these machines here. Make sure it's everywhere.
Yep.
I think that might be your key takeaway, isn't it?
I'll just I'll tack a little bit more onto that as well. And is if you do have an appliance or a machine for whatever reason that doesn't support an EDR tool, segregate it from the rest of the network.
Yep. Or if it's internet facing, segregate.
Well, that should be segregated. And that's sort of, I guess, my key takeaway would be monitoring your internet footprint. So knowing what do you actually have in your organization that's connected to the internet. I'm not talking about people's like workstations and things like that. We're sort of referring to servers that may be hosting something like Exchange,
Phone
VoIP,
system.
VMware Horizons is a good example for vulnerabilities that have happened recently. But so knowing what's out there and patching it. So making sure that you're keeping everything up to date and keeping up to date in terms of vulnerabilities as well. So that if something does get a vulnerability come out, knowing how am I going to respond to this? How quickly am I going to patch it? Am I going to take it down to mitigate any potential exploitation? And just sort of thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trappy, we've left you to lucky last. I think we've just covered the whole cybersecurity space there, but what have you got to add?
Well, we still got, mine is backups.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. How do we forget that one?
oh, how could you?
Yeah. And don't just back up to a local NAS.
Yeah, so like you need to have on-site backups for convenience, off-site backups for worst case scenario.
Immutable backups, right?
Exactly.
So-
And off-site on the cloud. If you take weekly backups, take continuous backups, so which mark the progress of things that have happened throughout the week, and then you've got your weekly backups which combine all that into a single thing, and then upload that up to the cloud, and you've got something to go back to.
And the worst you could lose is maybe a couple of days worth of data.
Exactly.
But make sure that the credentials are stored in a password safe, that you've got multi-factor authentication, that they're immutable, they can't be tampered with, because I don't really want to respond to another one where poor client thinks they've got backups, and unfortunately when they go to check them, they don't. So checking the backups, testing the backups, making sure they're not being altered with, and just backups.
Backups.
Backups. Yep. I think we're going to rename
Backup,
this session to backups. So. Well, guys, thank you for spending this time on this wonderful Friday afternoon, enjoying a beer, talking all things Cybeers on Cybeers. We are going to continue this with the content engine, and we're going to make sure this happens on a monthly basis. So everyone that's watching, expect more Cybeers coming very soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.